People out there who really know a lot about Bob Seger know about his manager Punch. He co-produced a lot of those early records with Seger.
What are the licks you need for that solo?
You kind of stick somewhere close to Chuck Berry land.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Today's episode is sponsored by Gator Cases. Guitarists, like any other musician, value the advantages of proper protection for their gear. Guitars, amps, effects, and accessories all need safe transport and storage. Luckily, Gator's got you covered. Right. I was watching these clips last night of you on the road with Bob Seger. You were on. How long were you out with him for? Like over a decade.
I did. Every couple years I did 3 tours with him.
Yeah.
And one in 13, one in 15, and then a long one, his final tour in 18, 19. Yeah.
How would you? Because I was comparing clips of you playing old time rock and roll, and I feel like you always got the solo in that song. But it was always a little different every time.
Okay.
When you're doing that kind of thing, yeah, how do you think about that solo in that song?
Okay, well, here's the story. So this is a good story, by the way. People out there who really know a lot about Bob Seger know about his manager, Punch. He co-produced a lot of those early records with Seger, and I think co-produced that song and actually found that song for him. So Seger that's a different gig than Delbert. Like there is a set list, everything's got to be like
every night, probably close to
pretty
it,
much,
right? Yeah,
pretty much. A couple of times he would let me have some liberty or freedom to play. That was one of them. The middle solo you have to play like the record, because that's got to sound like the record. But there's an outro solo on live on that song that's on the record too, but that's where the fade out happens.
Right.
Well, we played it longer than the record. So whenever his manager came out to see us, Bob would just say, at that point, play whatever you want, as long as it's in the style of something rock and roll, like, you know, and great. So when Punch would come out to the gigs, I'd be walking off stage and walk into the dressing room, and he'd find me and he'd go, "Hey, I got to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay, what's up?" And I always knew what he was going to, and it was that it bugged him that I would go off and play other things than what, I don't know what he thought he wanted to hear. But he'd go, "It's like you're playing the solo, and then I don't even know what song you're playing anymore." You know, he's like, "You got to play it like the record." And we had this thing going for every tour. I'd go, "Well, get me a copy of what happens after the record fades out."
After the fade out.
Because here's what's happening. We go longer than the record. And there's no reference for that. So if you have a recording of that extra 8 bars
You're like,
or whatever,
I will play whatever you want me to play.
Yeah, exactly. And
just tell me, show me what it is.
By the way, just so you know, Punch, Bob told me this is one of these moments where you can do what you want.
Yeah.
And he'd go, "Bob said that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, if Bob says it's okay, it's okay." But the next show, he'd say the same thing, and finally, I'd have to explain the whole thing over. "We play this longer than the record. I don't know what you want me to get me a recording." And he'd go, "Okay." And then the next night, you know, because he would come out for a couple of shows at a time, and then the next night I'd do whatever I wanted the next night, and he would come up to me and go, "You're doing a great job, kid."
Note, if you want to check out some of the licks that Rob is playing in this interview, you can get all of that plus a bunch of other great guitar lessons on my Patreon. Everything's tabbed out. Check it out. Link in the pinned comment. All right, back to the interview.
Walk away.
What are the licks you need for that solo? Or
I can't remember.
But what's the style of it? Like when you're kind of freaking out at the end, or you're just playing the outro part. Like
I didn't always. This is probably more what he was talking about. You know, you kind of stick somewhere close to Chuck Berry land.
Yeah.
That's just that song. But yeah, I mean, it's just all that, you know, like, you know, just, you know, typical rock and roll. Don't get too crazy. I think a couple times if I knew he wasn't around, I might do a little something, in there.
Something a little spicier.
Yeah. But in his mind, this music had to be, it was iconic music. So I get both points. It does have to sound like Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band on the record,
Yeah.
So but Bob was always encouraging it to be like, go, and then.
How do you play rhythm on that song? Do you play exactly what's on the
Yeah.
record in that rhythm part where you're doing that that power chord thing?
It's just literally Chuck Berry.
It's that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So wait, how did you get into the session scene from the road? And you say that you never even really desired to be a session player when you moved to town.
Well, when I moved to town, it was still very a much smaller group of people playing on the records, and I don't know, I didn't really know what it meant to be a session player. I knew about guys that played sessions, but I don't know. I just didn't think that I could hear myself on Nashville records. What was happening at the time was all Brent Mason. That was a lot of it anyway. And
was it too much? Was it like, oh my God, there's another Brent Mason lick on the radio? Like, I mean, he's the greatest ever, but
no, he's one of the most prolific guys in that style. He kind of took that thing to a very commercial next level and made it cool to have that kind of. I always thought he was, and still do think he's one of the greatest that's ever lived. And has a voice, I don't know. But I knew that I didn't really play that way. I have a version of things like that, but that's not me, and that's where music was. So I just kind of leaned into all the other pockets in town, like I loved. I was excited by like things like Buddy Miller or guitar playing like Richard Bennett or things that would be on Steve Earle records or. Eddie Shaver was great. There were all these other Americana alt country things that were happening. I kind of identified more with that because it felt like it was closer to like blues kind of stuff and Delbert and all that. So I don't know. I just didn't see myself being a desired thing to be on a Nashville record. But tastes changed and the styles definitely changed and things started opening up. And after I kind of had the Delbert gig for a good while, people just started asking me to do sessions. And since they were asking, I showed up. There was no pressure. I didn't feel like it was a career move.
What do you think gets you called? Is it intonation and touch? And like, why did people think? Because I feel like there's tons of great players that don't get called for sessions.
Oh, yeah.
So like, what do you think it is that people were identifying in you that they started calling you?
Well, all those things you mentioned, I think you just got to have. You just have to, you have to have that. And it's assumed that and there's tons, you don't move to town and not have that, I think, kind of. I think, I can't speak for other people, but I can say that I think my strong suit is coming up with hooks and being able to find different sounds that work together and I mean, just looking for things to do that are exciting and knowing when that happens. I don't know. I think maybe I just listen to a bunch of different music that your average session player in Nashville might not be as steeped in. They're steeped in all the stuff God, I don't mean that to sound weird or
just different stuff.
Just different. And then after I played on a few big songs, it just kind of got acceptable.